When you're playing soccer, there are red cards that tell you you're going to get sent off the field. And when it comes to your marriage or relationships, those red cards are called red flags. And there are 5 key red flags that will destroy marriages, destroy relationships. And if you can meet them early, if you can find them and change them before they get too big of a deal, then your relationship will flourish. This is what causes divorces. This is what causes marriages to break down, these 5 red flags. So in today's podcast episode, we're going to walk you through exactly what they are and how you can fix them. So strap in and find out what the 5 red flags are that will destroy a marriage. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Man podcast, where today we're going to be talking about, which you probably heard in the intro, the 5 red flags to look for in your marriage or relationship. Pretty important stuff because obviously the divorce rate is 50% for men. I actually found out recently that the second divorce rate and third divorce rate is even higher. Now, 89% of statistics are made up, but it was something along the lines of like 65% and like 79% for second and third divorces respectively, which is insane. You'd think the second time around you'd get it right. So if you are a man who is obviously, struggling in your relationship, you feel like that spark is gone, you're successful maybe in your business or career, but the relationship with your wife or partner is either on the edge of divorce or you just know it's not the same as it used to be. This will be an extremely powerful episode for you. We'll share with you these 5 red flags, as well as some tools and tactics you can use today to actually overcome them and move forward. So I guess the first red flag, the elephant in the room, is a lack of connection. A lack of connection. Like there's that connection at the beginning of a relationship, right? At the beginning of a relationship, there are butterflies in your stomach. There's magic in the air. It's like electricity sparks between you and you want to spend every moment together. And there's this deep level of connection, not just like inside of you. There's a connection that you chase, right? Like you literally want to be around them, hug them, touch them, be around them. And that connection begins to disappear, man. So I know both of us have gone through, or you've gone through a divorce, I've gone through losing my first marriage. What was the lack of connection like for you? How was that red flag present in your relationship, Sam?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like when you get into a relationship, there's the butterflies. There's so much intentionality around seeing each other, spending time with each other, and you're present. You're just captivated by each other. And then whether it's getting married or moving in together or whatever it is, it becomes more familiar, and we get busy, that dangerous word. We get focused on other things, and we become like ships passing in the night. It's like high five, I'm coming in the door, you're going out the door, high five, let's go. And over time, it just breaks down. Like I can see those moments as I look back over my relationship. You can see those moments just festering away and getting to a point where you're like, oh, that caught me off guard. When did we become so disconnected? And it wasn't a split second thing. It was this gradual undoing of intentionality over time.
Absolutely. And it happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. We hear from a lot of the clients that come to work with us, especially the high performance guys who are super busy and they don't see what's going on in front of them. They say my marriage ended overnight. And that is complete bullshit. I'm sorry to say that. I felt the same way when my wife left me. I was like, why didn't she warn me? It ended overnight. But the reality was there was a deep level of disconnection. So there's 2 types of disconnection that you can see as red flags. If you think of like a red flag, it really stands out. It's like a red card on the pitch, a red flag on the mast. It really stands out. And the first type of red flag is a flag of feeling. So when you feel a certain way in your relationship, you're going to have negative emotions going through you that lead to the 4 other red flags we're about to share. So 2 of the feelings that I reference a lot with our clients, the first way you know your relationship is not working is if you feel like roommates instead of soulmates. If you're living together, but you're sleeping in separate beds, if you are not making love like you used to or at all. I think, Sam, you and I talked about how the sex in your relationship got to like the point of 1 or 2 years between last time you had sex, which is scary, right? But it's common for a lot of men. So if you feel like roommates instead of soulmates, or another frame that you might be able to relate to is sleeping 6 inches apart, but feeling like you're 6 miles apart. Like you can reach over and touch your partner physically, but you feel like you're 6 miles apart. You feel like you're 6 kilometers away from each other. And this is such a common feeling, especially when you have an argument, you're sleeping on other sides of the bed, you're both turned the other way. And even though like physically you're close together, you feel so disconnected.
Yeah.
The second way to know if you're disconnected in a relationship and if that's a red flag is if the things that made you feel connected are no longer happening. For example, you're not having sex, you're not talking anymore, you're
Yeah.
not, sharing vision, which we'll get into later. So there's the feeling aspect of the red flag of disconnection, but then there's also the physical aspect of the things that no longer happen. So then you have two sides of the equations. You have feelings and you have facts. Feelings aren't always facts, and facts aren't always feelings. They're two different things, but they're intricately connected. So the first red flag is disconnection, which leads to the second one, poor communication. What does poor communication mean? I'm sugarcoating it here for the listeners, but what would you describe as poor communication? Is this a red flag anyone's experienced before?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't, to be honest. But
Yeah.
when you think about the early stages, like I love to think, I never like to think of the end of a relationship, but you look at the timeline of a relationship and what drew us together. For my relationship, it was the ability to just sit and talk. Again, it's that intentionality, but over time, the familiarity sets in, the talking becomes, over time, it becomes a grunt. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Cool. Then you stop talking about the things that matter to us, and we start talking about the details of life, and it's just a check-in. We stop hearing each other. We stop focusing in on, how are you feeling? How are you feeling loved? Or, is what I'm doing helping or hindering you? And checking in with the individual. And it's quite dangerous in a relationship, because we all desire that connection which comes through communication. We want to feel significant, yet when we stop talking, and communication's bigger than talking. It's listening, it's body language. It's like,
Tonality.
those movies where you see people in a relationship, they're like hugging on the couch, and then years go by and they're on opposite ends of the couch. One of our clients was sharing with me the other day. He said, we have this amazing theater room, and he said, the thing I hate about it now is all of those chairs are siloed, and over time we're on either end.
Yeah.
And that's where I've seen that physical representation of our communication just dwindling away, because we're not super close. We don't need to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you think about it, communication is the key to connection. So when my marriage broke down, I had lost the communication, and it wasn't just the words we said to each other. Like, yeah, we were arguing. That's communication. Yeah, we used negative tonality with the way we said things, angry tone, judgmental tone. But there was also the communication in our physical bodies, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, like sitting on opposite ends of the table. With our visual, like on our faces, we communicated. With our body language, we communicated. And you could tell there was a disconnection through that communication. So for a lot of men, they disconnect with communication. And then another red flag for us is we don't talk about the disconnection because it's uncomfortable to bring up what's right in front of you. It's uncomfortable to say, hey, we're not talking properly. Let's fix this. Do you know what most of us do instead? Is we pull out our screens and we just scroll. Do you know how many couples communicate by coming home saying, how was your day? Fine. Or how was your day? Shit. Or how was your day? And they get into an argument. And then they just sit on opposite ends of the couch. But it's not sitting there like looking at each other and thinking about what to say. It's sitting there in a state of sedation.
Yeah.
Like most of us sedate in our relationships. We sit on opposite ends of the couch and we scroll on our phones. And we don't do this intentionally, but there's almost like a hope that things are miraculously going to get better. Relationships are actually really hard work. You cannot sit on opposite ends of the couch watching Netflix or watching a movie or scrolling on your phone on social media and your relationship magically reconnects. So the red flag here with communication is if you're arguing a lot, common sense, your relationship's not good if you're arguing. People say arguments are normal and healthy. I disagree. I think arguments are necessary to learn about each other so that you can take that specific problem or topic that you're arguing about, learn each other's opinions and accept each other's opinions and grow together so you don't have the same fucking argument. So the first one is arguments. The second one is tonality. Like, how do you say things? If you're saying things in a judgmental tone, oh, what'd you do that for? Oh, you haven't done the dishes, huh? Like, you got to understand how attacking that is to someone. And sure, your partner might do that to you. We can't change her, which we'll get into in a second. So we have arguments, we have tonality, which is part of arguments. We have body language and body placement, right? So when you walk through the door, like, one of the easiest things you can do, no matter how shitty your day was as soon as you come home, look into your partner's eyes and smile. Smile, because despite how shitty your life was, you get to see them. Even if they're stressed and they're upset at the kids, you come home, smile, look in their eyes, and that's communication in a nutshell. And then another one is, if you're sitting on opposite ends of the couch and if you're not connected physically, just slide on over, man. Remember when we used to start dating, especially if you're like, a lot of the guys, maybe not you and I, because we were pretty tame, you go out with a date with a woman, like, you'd slowly put your arm over their shoulder, or like when Rosie and I were dating, we were at the movies and her hand was here and my hand was here, and we're like, put our hands together just gently, and there was that electricity, right?
Electricity.
You create that. Yeah, like you feel it. It's like, oh, we touched. you know? But we know these things are going on, yet we don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, because in our businesses or careers, if we noticed any of these red flags, we would change them. So the first one is disconnection, which is physical, which is emotional, feelings and what's happening. The second one is communication, arguments, tonality, and then your body language and your body position, which leads us to the third red flag, resentment and judgment. Now, this is heavily connected to connection, pun intended, or that wasn't a pun. What was that? Connected to connection. That was a confusion. That's what that fucking was.
Yeah.
So the first one is disconnection. We're disconnected physically and emotionally. That leads to poor communication, arguments, tonality, body language. And then we start to, instead of dealing with this, feel within us this resentment and this judgment. And it goes both ways. Like, I know with you, you felt a deep level of judgment from your partner. But in hindsight, where would you judge her? I'd love to know.
It's a good question. I think I think, in a lot of relationships, certainly in mine, it's this progression, the disconnection, the lack of communication, resentment sets in. You have this belief that you're doing all of these things on your own without their support, even though if you're to zoom out, which we're not great at if we're not aware, you zoom out and you go, actually, we're both have great intentions, yet we're just working away from each other as opposed to together. Resentment sets in. People can then feel like they've settled. They've settled for a life that they never wanted, and the spark's gone. And as a result, they start looking at their partner through the lens of judgment instead of love. And no matter when you it's like putting, you put these glasses on, I'm going to see through the lens. When that happens through judgment, doesn't matter what they do, unless you're willing to take these glasses off and start to see them through love and desire and those things. You're forever going to see them through what they don't do, what they don't bring. I always felt that, no matter what I was doing, how much I was earning, that it wasn't enough. And I look at it now and, emotionally I had disconnected. Communication wasn't effective. And as a result, I felt judged. But, in the moment, you're like, no, just what's going on here? It's not my fault. But when you zoom out, you go, wow, look at my part, that I had a part to play in that. Yeah.
Hey, legend, if you're getting value from this podcast, then you're going to love our Empowered Man 7-Day Challenge. Inside, we've taken some of the best content our clients invest thousands of dollars for to change their lives, and we've given it to you in the course of 7 days. This challenge is worth over $3,000, and you can get it for $37, 97% off. Inside, we'll teach you how to fix your marriage and relationships and reconnect with your partner, your kids, your wife. We will teach you how to take back your time, how to take back your power, get into powerful routines, and how to take control of your life, take control of your mind, take control of your business, take control of your health, take control of your wealth. Sounds too good to be true, but there's a complete money back guarantee. So if you're enjoying this podcast, go to elitebusinessman.com/challenge. That's elitebusinessman.com/challenge. It's going to be in the call notes as well, and you'll be able to register for this challenge that will completely change your life. It's hard to do that though, because if your relationship or marriage is falling apart, there's the disconnection that occurs and the lack of communication that occurs. but there's also resentment and judgment of two areas. So there's
Yeah.
like the judgment of the situation and then the judgment of the person. So
Mm.
like you're disconnected and not having sex, that's upsetting. She's at you and you're arguing over stupid things, that's upsetting. So then there's this resentment of like, well, what am I even doing this for? Like you're resenting this person. But then what happens is you judge them for the lack of sex. You judge them for them giving you shit and judging you. So it becomes this mirror. And it's almost like you're both in this position of judgment and resentment because both of you aren't happy.
Mm.
And there's only one way to fix that if your relationship sucks, is one of you has to step up. And unfortunately, life is not fair, and it's not fair, but I believe the man should step up. Like, of course, the woman has a role to play, but when we come from a frame of resentment or judgment, we're also coming from a frame of blame.
Mm.
And that blame game that comes up, that you felt it from her, she's blaming you for all this stuff. So then what happens inadvertently is you blame her back. It's not said. You don't, again, there's no communication, the red flag. But it's said through tonality. It's said through the way you look at each other. It's said through like little passing comments. Like, oh, you did that again. Oh, okay. It's going to be one of those nights. Oh, you don't want to give me a kiss goodnight. Sweet. Like there's these little things we say or do. And it's like we project this resentment and judgment because it's our own wounds that we haven't dealt with.
Yes.
And the irony of this is, which is what you ended on, is the only way to fix that is to take some ownership. And that's so hard to do for an egotistical, successful man. And it's so hard to do for a woman who wasn't taught. Like it's really challenging to go, okay, we are disconnected, red flag. We're not having sex. We feel like we're separate, even though we live together with two ships passing in the night. We're not communicating well, physically, mentally, emotionally, with our body language, with our words. And because of that, I resent and judge this person, and I feel resented and judged. What am I going to do about it? That's so hard to do. And I think a reason it's so hard to do is because a lot of men listening to this are going, wait, you can do that? Like you can feel all those things and say, you know what? I'm putting my hand up. And even though I feel all those things, I'm going to do something about it. A lot of men don't realize they can do that. A lot of our clients come to us when their marriage is ending. And they come in and they've tried psychology, marriage counselors, therapists. They've tried everything. They're dealing with anxiety and stress from the business or work. They're under all this pressure. The wife doesn't love them anymore. They're not having sex. They're disconnected. And we help them fix things in 2 to 3 weeks. And do you want to know what the secret is? It's we get them to realize that if they feel or think anything negative, if they're having problems, they created that so they can fix it.
100%.
They're like, yeah, but my wife did this. It's my wife. Yeah, your wife has a role to play. You can blame her, but that doesn't help you find a solution. That helps you focus on a problem. You know the problem. You feel it every day.
Yeah.
So what can you take ownership for in your relationship, especially around blame, resentment, and judgment? This is why marriage counselors and therapists often cause divorces. Sorry, let me reframe that. They don't cause divorces. They can exacerbate the problems that already exist. A lot of people comment on our Facebook ads. We spend about 50 grand a month at the moment on Facebook advertising. People are like, how are you qualified? What are you qualified in? I'm like, cool. I've kept like 247 marriages together. They don't care about that. They're like, where's your piece of paper? What college did you go to for psychology? I'm like, dude, this is what most psychology is. And I'm not knocking all of them. There are amazing psychologists and therapists out there. But most of the time you'll come in to see a therapist or a psychologist, and they'll be like, cool. So what are the problems you have in your marriage? So you start talking about these things that have been left unsaid, and they're said through resentment and judgment. Cool. How long has that been going on for? How does that make you feel? You know, when Sam says that, how does that make you feel? And then all this emotion comes up, and it's an open wound. And then she's like, or he is like, cool, I was up. I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Ding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like $300. And then you leave, and then you're like, that's really painful. And you've got no tools to fix it.
Yeah. Oh man.
This happened to you, didn't it? The open wound thing. This happened to you. And I'm sure a lot of guys can relate to this. What happened to you?
Yeah. Well, like I think we were 5 or 6 sessions in before we even started looking at anything that could be tried.
Yeah.
And attempted like as toward an outcome. And it was,
how
do you feel? And it was, I remember the first session, my ex had an initial session with her by herself, came into this second session, which was our first one together. And it was, you know, tell me about your childhood, tell me about open up all these wounds. And like, it opened up a lot. Like we're both a mess at the end of the session. And then she's like, all right, well, we'll see you in a fortnight. And I was like, I went out and I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
what do I do now?
Yeah.
It's like
What now?
someone rips the Band-Aid off and there's no plan of attack for healing or
Yep.
even just getting through. And it was actually a really confusing process for me.
Yep. Yep. It is.
Being a coach, like, I believe the purpose of a problem is to be identified so that we can then navigate toward an outcome.
Yep.
But it was just, let's open up the problem, flesh it out, which I get, and there's power in that. But then you leave it, and it you know, an open wound left, you know, untreated, it festers and it gets infected and it lingers.
There's only power in it. There's only power in it if you do something about it.
Yeah.
So like if somebody came to us and my wife's about to leave, I'm stressed out at work, business is making millions, but my wife's about to leave, she cheated on me. We're like, cool. Like, I'm not going to ask you how you're feeling. I'm going to ask you how the problem happened, what could you do differently, and what can you take ownership for? And then I'm going to give you a tool right away. So it's like, cool, write a list of all the things that you did at the beginning of the relationship and start doing one a day for your wife. Sit down with your wife and tell her all the things you're taking responsibility for. There are 2 tools I just told you in 2 seconds, 10 seconds, that will radically change your relationship forever. But mainstream media and social media and therapists who read from a book, by the way, not from life experience a lot of the time, a lot of them just ask you these stupid questions that aren't stupid on their own when they're coupled with tools. But if you ever open a wound without a tool, that is a recipe for disaster. It's like going and breaking someone's arm and the bone's sticking out. And then it's like, cool, go figure it out. It's like, no, the bone's sticking out. Let's reknit the bone. Let's sew the skin back together. Let's wrap it up. Like, you got to have a tool to wrap these things up. So resentment and judgment are huge. If you're feeling those in your relationship from either, if you're resenting or judging the situation you're in, or if you're resenting or judging your partner, or if your partner is resenting or judging you, if any of those things are happening, that is a massive red flag. And the solution to that is to take ownership. It's like, cool, I'm playing the blame game. Just understand that, let me say this again. If your relationship isn't working, it means you're playing the blame game. Like, your partner will have a role to play in this. But if you are blaming them for the lack of sex, the shitty communication, the judgment you feel from them, if you're resenting them, you are allocating power to them. They obviously have a role to play. But what you get to do as a man who is strong and powerful is go, cool, despite how I feel, what can I take ownership for? How can I stop blaming and looking at problems and start looking at solutions? What can I do? Who can I become? Ask these powerful questions. Part of what falls under resentment and judgment is thinking you can fix or change someone.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I think that in a relationship, well, prior to kind of going, yep, we're together, we're moving forward, we're getting married or whatever it is, we can very easily overlook certain red flags and think, oh, I can change that. I can fix that. And we go into a marriage with the idea that we can fix that person. I mean, question number 1 that comes up for me is that person broken? Like, are they really broken? Or are they doing the best they can with the tools, the awareness that they've got right now?
Yeah.
Because none of us have it all together. There are no, like, aside, there are no perfect relationships. A good relationship is highly possible. An exceptional relationship is extremely possible. It takes work. It takes intentionality. And yes, there's certain things that we get to, you know what, that's not a deal breaker. And, yeah, sure. But there's certain things that we go in thinking, oh, I can change them. I can fix that.
Yeah.
And it's a recipe for disaster, because when we realize we can't, that's when resentment and judgment sets in.
Yeah. I remember I used to try to change my wife all the time because I thought my way was the best way. I'm a masculine alpha man. I'm like, I need to fix her. I need to improve her, upgrade her. And every time I came from a place of love, she would put up her shield and defend. Because the reality is, if you're trying to fix or change someone, there is an element of judgment there. And if you're judging someone for who they are, even if it's not ideal, even if they could be better, then you're attacking them, especially if you do it in like a judgmental way, which means they're going to put up a shield. They're going to be resistant to that change and that fixing, which is going to cause more of a rift in the relationship. What I've
Mm,
now realized is instead of trying to fix or change my wife, what I get to do as a powerful leader, as a masculine man, is I get to guide her. And if she wants to come on the journey, great. And if she doesn't, I don't get to judge her for that. Because even though I think it is the right way, my way isn't the right way. Her way is the right way. Your way is the right way for you. And what's really
mm,
cool about relationships is when you learn how to do this, you do it with no expectation. You try and guide someone so you can grow together, and they are much more open to taking on that feedback and coming on the journey with you. But you got to stop attacking and judging and resenting, because that ultimately means you're trying to change someone. And guess what?
yeah.
If someone tried to do that to you, tell them to fuck off. Right. So it's like, it's really about taking ownership for this. Like let's be honest, right? Nothing's black or white. There's gray areas everywhere. Like if your partner's doing meth or ice in Australia, right, smoking meth, then you have every right to want to change them. But at the
Mm,
end of the day, like you can't make them do anything. You can try and like smack the pipe out of their hand, but this is case to case, obviously, you
yeah.
know? So we have disconnection, red flag number one. We have poor communication. Then we have this resentment and judgment that comes from that. And that builds into wanting to change someone because we're judging them for who they are. The fourth red flag is conflicting values. And this one is huge. We're going to do an entire episode on values in the next few episodes. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel or the podcast platform you're listening on. Values are extremely important, right? Values are the things you deem to be important in your life. So when you have a value and something is important, that means you import it into your consciousness. So for example, one of my values is growth. I love growth. For years in my relationship, my wife wasn't addicted to growth like I was. So I was growing, doing courses, personal development, all these things, learning about the mind, the body. And my wife is just being her lovely self who I fell in love with. But the problem is, if she's the person I fell in love with and I'm growing, we are both at different levels. And there's a risk that I grow past her or vice versa. And if that happens and we have different values, then there's going to be a rift that begins to occur. Because who I fell in love with 7 years ago is different to who she is now. And who I am 7 years ago is different to who I am now. So now we have this rift because I've grown for 7 years and she's grown for 2. We're disconnected, right?
Mm,
And this is very, very common, not knowing each other's values. Like what is important to your partner? There are
mm,
2 types of values. In a relationship, you got to know 2 things: the values that you hold dear to your heart and the values your partner has. So the values
mm,
are the things that are important to you. Is it growth? Is it integrity? Is it fishing? That could be a value. It could be adventure. It could be fun. It could be fashion. If your partner has completely different values, at a certain point, that's going to catch up with you. At the beginning of a relationship, you can have completely different values and be infatuated and in love and having sex and communicating well. But after a few years, it's going to show. You're watching
mm.
footy every night or whatever, and she's watching the Kardashians, right? It's a minor value difference, but over
Yeah.
time, that can be a big rift. So, I mean,
Mm.
do you even know, like, do you know your core values, Sam? What are your core values?
Yeah, I've got a few like freedom,
Yep.
family, community, a lot around relationships,
Mm-hmm.
growth, contribution is a huge one for me.
Mm-hmm.
Health, because I know what it's like to live without health.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I've got some other things that kind of flow down from each category. But
Yep.
one of the one of the dangers in getting into a relationship where there's this misalignment of values, we
Mm-hmm.
can kind of easily overlook that and be infatuated with the person. But like 1 degree of separated values over time, like you can
Mm,
move in a different direction.
so true.
I like to think of values as an anchor. I'm writing some content at the moment on this. Values are an anchor for
Mm-hmm.
vision. And if
Mm,
they're the anchor, they're kind of holding us, what's the word, kind of planted.
mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, our vision, and we're going in different directions, we get to a point where we want different things, not even
Yeah.
remotely the same thing. And we're going in completely different directions.
Yep.
And, but it's easy in the moment to be infatuated and overlook that. Oh, it's not, you know. Now, one of the things with values is that they might be different. Like your values and your wife's values might be slightly different, yet it's a matter of going, well, I think I can plug into that. Like
Mm,
she might like, think of an example. She
Kardashians.
might she might like, what's that?
Kardashians.
Kardashians. Well, it's funny. It's like, well, she might like going out with her friends on a Saturday night once a
Mm,
month or something, and you might like watching a football game on a Saturday night. And it's like that actually works for us. I can plug into that because
yeah,
you've got your Saturday night, I've got my Saturday night, and
yeah.
then we've got our other things. I can plug into that. You
Mhm.
like you like sunbaking. I like fishing. Let's go. Let's go down to the
Yeah,
beach.
let's
We
do
can
it
plug into
together.
that.
Yeah, but you
Yeah,
can't do that without communication.
of course you can.
And
Yeah.
it's really hard to do that if you don't even know what a value is. Like a lot of listeners will listen to this and go like, I work hard to make money. That's my value. It's like, no, that's what you do. The
Mm,
values are the things that are important to you. It's what you spend your time doing. It's what lights you up. It's
yeah.
what you would do if you weren't working. Like
Mm,
values are, like you said, the anchor for vision. So if your vision is to have a family and be wealthy and have freedom, but you're not living by your values of freedom and you're growing this business, but you have no time for your family, you're constantly
mm,
stressed, then are you living by your value of freedom and the pursuit of the vision of freedom? And this is
mm,
what can cause a lot of stress and challenges in relationships. This is what happened with my wife. She didn't want to have kids. One of my highest values was family. Since I was a child, I wanted kids. She didn't want kids. She wanted to go out and snort cocaine and party. So my value is family. Her value is freedom and partying. And there was a disconnect. We didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about our values. With my current relationship with Rosie, my wife, we've been together for 7 years. I asked her like 2 or 3 weeks in, what's important to you in your life? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to be a mother? Do you want to have a family? Do you have a vision for your future for investing? And our values aligned from week 4. But a
mm,
lot of guys listening to this, they've never had this conversation.
mm.
And then what we do as men, we throw this thing out there of like, yeah, but we've been together for 20 years. It's like, so what? You can like that doesn't mean anything. You can be a doctor for 20 years, but medicine changes. I think the statistic made up is like every like 3 weeks it changes. That's how
Yeah.
fast medicine's progressing. So like the time frame has nothing to do with it. I really like what you said about the 1 degree shift in values. So if you think about it in a relationship, if you have different interests and values, it's like a plane taking off from one side of the world to the other. Obviously, they don't do that long a flight. But if it's 1 degree off, because that plane has got flying for 12 hours, it can be
Mm,
hundreds of miles off course, even if it's 1 degree off. So it's
yeah.
extremely important as a couple and in a relationship to know your own values, what's important to you, and to know your partner's values. And to
Mm,
understand that it's very unlikely that all of your values are going to align. But if you're aware of each other's values, you can sort of like work around each other. And if my wife wants to go shopping with the baby, that's not one of my values. I'll go do that with her once a month because it makes her happy. And that's what
yeah.
love is. Love is compromise. Like the red flag is not knowing each other's values. The way to get over that is to understand each other's values and to compromise and to do these things together, like you said.
Mm,
Because if you're growing apart, there will be a point where you can't cross that rift. So it's a
mm,
very, very important red flag that we get to address, which leads to the fifth and final red flag, which is a lack of a vision.
mm,
And this is massively tied into values. My relationship is fantastic. I've helped hundreds of men fix their marriage, but I realized recently that my wife and I don't have a joint vision. We have a beautiful 15-month-old daughter. We have $1 million business. We have an amazing life in the Gold Coast. Everything's great, but we don't sit down and talk about our goals and dreams together. We're sort of just drifting through life. And the drifting's amazing. We have a great relationship, lots of intimacy, but I know that if we don't create a vision together, at a certain point, cracks will begin to appear. So one
mm,
of the things I've done this month is I've set aside 4.5 hours. It's one of my quarterly goals. Every month I do this. So 4.5 hours a month to sit down with my wife, probably spread over four weeks, and do joint vision creation together. Like, what
mm,
sort of house do we want to live in? What sort of family do we want? Where do we want our daughter to be raised? How do we want her energy to be? Who do we
mm,
want to hang out with? Like, we don't do this.
mm,
And it's crazy when we do this in business. We set goals, we set a vision. We don't do it for our personal life or for our relationships. And that is a massive red flag.
mm,
Because if you can't see a future together, then what's the point in being together? This is
mm.
also how divorces happen. The wife says, I want a divorce because she can no longer see a future together. That's that overnight divorce that we talk about.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
this idea of vision, like I'm sure it happened with me and Anita, it happened with you and Holly. Like, did you guys have a vision and how is that red flag manifesting in your life?
I think, a lack of vision is a cause. for conflict, because vision shapes our choices. It shapes how we spend our time, how we spend our money, and
Mm-hmm.
they're often some of the biggest causes of conflict in a relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
early on, we had a vision. That vision changed. We did a lot of exciting things. We got to see, bits and pieces of the world. We got to live interstate. We got to meet lots of new people, but it was like our vision, would kind of happen fairly quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
yep, okay, what's the next 3 to 5 years look like? Okay, like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
just over time, you know, we, um, we moved back to South Australia in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had a kid, and all those things. It's like, the vision just sort of settled down. And then,
Yeah.
oh, what do we want to do? Do we want to do that? Oh, yeah. But there was no like grand, this is what we're working towards.
Yes. A joint
And,
vision.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the cause for conflict. It's the cause for that,
Yeah.
that degree of separation, because we
Yeah.
have these, like, I'm big on vision. I have vision boards and words and all sorts. And I
Mm.
built this vision, and it came to a point where I realized I have my vision, but we don't have our vision.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
And then that typically means one partner's lost and drifting. And then they
Yeah.
will build resentment towards the other partner who has the vision because they're like, I want that. But we don't sit
Mm,
down and create it together,
mm,
which is fascinating. And for a lot of men, especially guys we work with, as a man, for a lot of us, the goal is to have a family. It's like have a wife, have kids, have the house, have freedom and a business, right? Which is an amazing goal. But for a lot of guys, they achieve that. We have clients who make $60 million a year. We have clients with 300 employees. We have very successful clients, and they come to us and they're like, I've got the house, I've got the car, I've got the kids, I've got the wife, and my wife's about to leave, and I'm stressed out and unhealthy. How is this possible? It's because we achieve that goal, but we don't keep building. And we think building is just money and success. It's not. It's also, what do we want to be doing? When do we want to be doing it? Where do we want to holiday? What do we want to
yeah.
build together? What do we want to create? Who do we want to
Mm,
be together? How do we want to raise this family? Like setting these goals, as busy men, we don't make time for that. But it's
yeah.
funny because when you're too busy to look after your relationship, you're going to have to slow down when the partner says, I don't love you anymore. You're going to
Yeah.
have to slow down when the children are raised by another man. This may or may
Mm,
not happen to you, but it happens to 50% of marriages. So you
mm,
got to have a vision in your relationship. You really do. If you don't, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I think for a lot of busy guys, it's really hard to create that. It's like, how do I make the time? It's like, dude, you got to make the time. It's a massive red flag. If
mm,
you're listening to this and you can relate to anything we've said, and you don't have a joint vision for your relationship, you don't sit down once a month, once a week and go, hey, like, what are we working towards together? What are we going to do together? Who are we going to be? Then that can cause a lot of damage, you know?
yeah.
And this is how I got depressed last year. I didn't have a vision. I didn't know what I was working towards. We have an entire episode on vision that we've launched on this podcast previously. So we have these 5 very core red flags. Red flag number 1 is a disconnection in your relationship. If you're feeling any of these, by the way, know that you're not alone. But there's the disconnection physically, like you're not having sex, you're not making love, you're not holding hands, you're not kissing, you're not touching. Then there's the feeling of disconnection. You feel like you're 6 miles apart. You feel like 2 ships passing in the night. You feel like roommates instead of soulmates. That's a massive red flag. If you're feeling that, you get to address it right away. The second
Mm.
one is poor communication, which is what? Tonality? What's poor communication? Let's summarize that one. Sam, I'll let you have some shine.
Poor communication. It's not talking.
Yeah.
It's that, like we moved in on the couch when we were dating. It's
Yeah.
moving further away. Stop talking.
Yeah.
We stop eating together. We stop, doing all the things that once connected us.
Yeah.
We start reacting to each other instead of
Yeah.
resolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally just like not being able to talk physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's scrolling on phones, it's all that sort of stuff. The
Yeah.
third red flag is resentment and judgment.
Mm.
Resenting our partner, resenting the situation, judging our partner, judging the situation. If you are feeling resentment or judgment from your partner and you feel like you don't give that back, please look in the mirror, because it is a mirror. Often what we feel like we're getting, we're giving. So that's a
Yeah.
massive red flag. If you have that, we need to address it right away. What can you take ownership for? It's a very powerful tool. And then
Mm.
conflicting values. If you don't know what's important to you and you don't know what's important to her, and you haven't come together and shared what's important to each other, and you're not setting your vision and goals, which is the 5th red flag, together around those values, then this is a recipe for disaster. Now,
Yeah.
if you've experienced one or any or all of these red flags, first of all, know that you're not alone. And second, know that if you're listening to this, it might not be too late. If you're still in the relationship, you get to make a decision today to pick one of these things. Now, obviously, in our Empowered Man program, we teach how to do this. We have 5 coaches in your pocket. If you're interested in that, there'll be a link down below to apply to work with us. But regardless, even if you never work with us, we want you to have an amazing relationship full of intimacy, connection, love. The truth is, you can have an amazing relationship full of intimacy, connection, love, sex, but it requires one thing, a commitment to look at the red flags and face the brutal facts of reality. In Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he has a passage, a chapter about the only way to make good decisions is to face the brutal facts of reality. So ask yourself, what are the brutal facts of my relationship? What red flags do I have in disconnection, communication, resentment and judgment, trying to change people? Do we have the same values? Do we have a vision together? Find one of those areas that's a red flag and commit to doing something about it. Be honest with yourself about the problems in your relationship because they're not going to go away on their own. But the beautiful thing is you can fix them fast. So choose one area that's not working and ask yourself, what's one thing I can do today, this week, this month to change that area? If you do that for a week, a month, a year, magic begins to happen. But it requires a commitment to face those brutal facts and take some action. All right. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Sam?
There's no perfect relationship. You know, a relationship can be made exceptional through that intentionality. You know, like encourage those listening now, like just close your eyes for a minute and imagine a relationship where you are connected, deeply connected with your partner, where you're communicating from a place of love and understanding, where you're seeing that person as a whole person and you're loving them as a whole person, not focusing on what they lack. You're anchored and you're aligned in the same values, and you're creating a vision founded upon those values that launches you into the future that you once dreamt about. Like imagine that gets to be the relationship that you guys have when you are intentional about fixing things.
Yeah, that gives me goosebumps, man. Like, and then the reality is, if you just heard that and you want that, you can have it, man. If you put 10% of the time you spend on your work or business into your relationship, magic would begin to happen. But it requires time and energy and effort and work. And man, what's really cool about being a successful high performance guy, business owner, entrepreneur, manager, driven man, is you already have the skill set to go all in, which is going to be another one of our podcast episodes. So go all in on your relationship, man. Next week, we'll talk about communication a bit more. So make sure you tune into that. I hope you got some value from this podcast episode. If you did, my friend, please, wherever you're watching or listening, give it a thumbs up or 5 stars or whatever it may be. Share it with a friend, share it with your partner, and make sure you like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Next week, we'll be talking about communication, and we'll see you for the next episode of the Empowered Man podcast. Hey, brother, I hope you got a ton of value from that podcast. If you would like to work with us personally and get some of the best content we've launched for our clients who invested thousands of dollars, then go and complete our 7-day Empowered Man Challenge. This mission will completely transform your life. If it doesn't, you won't have to pay a cent. It's only $37, and it is game-changing if you want to take back control. So if you want to find balance between business, family, and life, if you want the relationship, the health, the wealth that you deserve, then go to elitebusinessman.com/challenge. That's elitebusinessman.com/challenge and take up this challenge to take back control of your life.